So this video may be titled A Day in the Life of our garden here in Raleigh, but it's more like a week in the garden. We're going to show you a lot of tasks that we would do over the course of a week, 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there over the course of a week to maintain this garden. It's actually not a tremendous amount of maintenance because we've gotten the weed seed count down so much now that it's just very little weeding as long as we're staying on top of it. That's the main thing. And the ground is really receptive to rain, and so it's, whatever rain we're getting, it's absorbing a lot of that into the soil. So a lot has been done to lessen the maintenance, plus a lot of plant picking for things that aren't extremely high maintenance, where you would look at this and think it's really a lot of maintenance because there's, I think with the plants we've planted over there in the native garden this year, over 400 different types of plants in here. But we didn't really go after things that were a tremendous amount of work or get leaf spot issues or insect issues and all those kinds of things. So, but we're gonna jump in, show you some tasks we would do. And again, this is a day in the life, in the garden, but the way we would actually approach this is we would come out at 6:30 in the morning and do one of these tasks, and then another one maybe the next day, and then another one on Saturday after, late Saturday, whatever. But let's get started with weeds. Weeding is, an important part of the garden, and we have the few weeds that we do have left are really good at masking themselves here in the garden. So there's one right here. This Virginia copperleaf is a particularly bad one. You see that, how it's in the middle of this salvia and it's managed to get itself up, this tall. Look how tall that weed is because it's so good at masking itself. I got the entire root on it, so I'm confident it's not coming back. But it's in the, it's one of these spurge family members that's really good at making seed right on the back of the leaves. So as it gets taller like this, it's just dropping seed. So this one's definitely made seed before I got to it. I don't know, how many of those have dropped on the ground at this point, but Virginia copperleaf, we're gonna do a video, I've said, identifying some of these summer weeds, but look how big that thing is because it's so good at masking itself. Make sure you have a weed bucket, okay, to put these things in. I wanna make sure that I pass along a piece of information here that is important. If I throw this in the path, there are weed seeds on the soil that I pull up out of the ground. So, just this one just came up super, super clean, which is weird. But I guarantee you, any soil that you pull up on the roots of something has other weed seeds from either this plant or other plants. And so if I throw them out anywhere out here, even on the patio, I'm gonna be throwing weed seeds out into the garden. I wanna get these removed, again, especially if they have soil on the roots. We'll just walk along the paths with the bucket and, try to identify the weeds and get them pulled out. This is another one that's kind of interesting. This is horse nettle and it is armed. So make sure you wear a glove if you're gonna be pulling this one. Again, I don't wanna dig them out. I just broke that completely off. I really like to get that whole root if I could, and I did not. And then there's some other, couple other weeds, more of that Virginia copperleaf. I didn't get that one completely out of the ground, but again, wear a glove for some of these. That thing is well armed. I don't know if you can see the thorns on that horse nettle, but most of them are not armed, but that one is. But we're down to a few invasive plants that consistently are throwing seed down on us from around us. And then a few of the same weeds over and over and over again because they're really good at masking themselves in other things. That horse nettle, that leaf is similar enough to that salvia that you'll let it go for just a little too long and it'll make some seed, and then unfortunately that puts it in that repetitive thing, trying to get them before they make seed, and that's why we're scouting often. If you put in vegetables, that's another task you need to be thinking about very frequently. Even if you're not eating all the vegetables that come out of your garden, they need to be picked because it could potentially slow them down as they figure out. These plants are trying to make seed. So they're trying to, all these open flowers on these cucumbers right here are trying to get pollinated, and then it's trying to make cucumbers and make seed. And what we want to do is keep fooling it that it hasn't made seed. And so, we'll come out here and very frequently pick the cucumbers. This one wasn't not quite ready, but there you go. There's this is what, do you remember what cucumber this is? I don't either. It's a good one though. We did it from seed, right? Yeah, okay. I need to look up and remember, this is another thing, writing things down during the summer, especially while you're picking some of these tomatoes and cucumbers and other things that you may have in your garden, eggplants. Make sure if one is just really underperforming, you might want to write that down, that you don't want to buy it again the next year. Because sometimes you'll be looking through a seed catalog and go, oh, we've had that one before. Oh, we've had that one before. And you don't really remember it was actually a bad experience and you order it again. So if it's positive or negative, whatever it is, you know, pick them frequently to keep them growing. Do any pruning you need to do, any staking you need to do if they're spreading across the ground. I've got a rogue tomato that's made it all the way over here somehow. Don't really know how that happened. But I also got cucumbers laying down here on the ground that I'd like to get staked back up here and get them off the ground. We typically don't have cucumbers. Usually the 100 degrees will burn them out pretty good, but I think that I've got them this year up off the ground better, and they're shading their roots a little bit better, and that may be the reason that I'm going a little bit longer than normal, but these are still blooming like crazy. But pick frequently. And while I've got you here, this tomato coming up through here, this is a sucker right here. You can choose to keep these or let them go, but basically this vine is heading off this direction, right? And this is a new vine that's heading off that direction. And every third leaf here, there's another sucker. So here's a new sucker right there. And then this sucker's gotten so big that typically I won't break these out by hand. I'll break that one out by hand. But you can break these out. You can actually root them. And I can you can keep going down in there and taking those suckers out if you want to. It does increase the air movement. I've not done it very well over here, so they're very, very full. But it does. Every single time that thing creates a new vine, it makes it fuller and bigger and more gangly and a little harder to find the fruit, honestly, over the course of the season. But desuckering could also be on your list. I can't do much about this one, but we've shown this ligustrum a couple of times over the years. It's on our neighbor's property back here. And every one of those are seeds up there. I hope you can see that this morning. Those were flowers a few weeks ago, which weirdly, I'm kind of allergic to. I'm not allergic to many things, but when ligustrum go off, I definitely feel like my allergies kick in. If you have any of these types of invasive plants, you know, the Elaeagnuses and the ligustrums and other things that happen to be on your property, this is more seed that's going to fall, and it's going to come up everywhere. And I don't know how long the seed is viable for, but that is 100,000 plus seeds for sure. I have no idea what the actual number is on a 40-foot tall ligustrum like that. It is an unbelievable. We've had a really good kind of rainy, cool season, and so it is just chock-a-block full of seed up there. So if you have any of those types of plants and they've finished flowering, take these off before they become viable seeds later in the season, or it's another thing you're going to be fighting. You're going to be fighting your own plants in your own garden. I'm going to do a little pruning in this area. Don't do a lot of pruning during the summertime, but I'll show you a few things we will prune. But I've got a couple of weeds. There's a false daisy here. This one is one that can be another one that can be particularly good at masking itself. Look how big that thing has gotten here. This is a aster family member, sunflower family member. It has these little white flowers on the top. Some people grow this plant. I think this plant is from Thailand, I think, and it has some medicinal purposes, and so I think that's why it's ended up in our gardens. And of course, being a sunflower member, it can make a lot of seed. They're very good at, these composites at making seed. Small white flowers, and again, the pollinators are in this bed, and they're doing a pretty good job of pollinating this one as well. But again, look how well it had masked itself coming up through here. I mean, we had all those people at the open garden, and none of you identified this big giant weed that was in my in my annual border here. And then there's another of these Virginia copperleaf down in here. So while I'm observing or cutting back some of these things, I just threw that on the ground back there behind me after I said I don't. But there it is, spurge family members, typical, where they put the seed along the back of the leaf like that. They're good at making seed. Pretty much all those spurge family members. But look at that, 2 giant weeds right in front of us all season long. Isn't that amazing how these things are, you know, I say we don't have many weeds, but you know, there's 2 giant ones in the border. So a couple of options here. I've got the pollinators are out on these salvia already. Normally, we'll take about 1/3 of our annuals back at one time. So we've got 2 of these salvia borders right here together. And so I definitely, this one got pruned 1 additional time and it's flushed out and it's full bloom right now. So I definitely wouldn't be over there pruning on that. I'll do that when it slows down again. But this side over here, I'd really like to give this just kind of an overall haircut, but the bees are out already. So if I was gonna do it this way, if I'm doing it while the bees are out here already, I could just individually deadhead them, the ones that are pretty much spent. Birds are on these taking the seed too. And so I'm really letting them get to the point where not only has the flower been finished and pollinated, but the seed is also gone too. So, but I can just kind of quickly go through like this. If the bees weren't on it already and it was an hour ago, I would have probably just taken about 1/3 of this or half of this and cut it down, you know, half the height almost. And it'll just flush back out. And then every week or 2, we'll do another 1/3. You don't have to cut it back that far, but you can. I've got this little narrow path here, so I'd like to control it a little bit. But again, every time I come in here, I'm going to find another weed or 2. So it's also good just to address these spaces. But so that would be my strategy here. Again, no general pruning on shrubs for the most part this time of year. Here's an azalea. There's a fall blooming Encore Azalea. If I prune that right now, I'm going to prune the flowers off of it. So also knowing what you have. And then there's some things like this salvia here that definitely lend themselves to individual pruning, because I've still got flowers on, you know, that haven't been pollinated on here, and then I've got entire stalks that are just kind of done. So this is just a cleanup job potentially. I won't put you through this whole this whole thing, but you can kind of spot the ones that are completely finished, and then they have new spikes coming up right beside them. So if they're 99% done, I'm going to cut them back. And this stuff can just be dropped right underneath. If it's a healthy plant, there's really no reason for you to bucket this up or anything. Just cut them and throw them right up under the plant. If you can, you know, out of sight, out of mind, and they'll keep moisture around the base of the plant. Again, if it's sick, don't do that. And back up just a hair, Steph. The other pruning operation that we need to do is rescuing plants. And so this red verbena has been very, very happy here. Although the 100 degrees, we had 100 degree 3 days in a row. It's not as happy from that. But you see what it's doing to this pine. So even though this verbena is a perennial, I consider it a short-term member of this garden, and I'm not going to let it damage the other things that are around it. So I will come in here and carefully, you may have to do this with a pair of hand pruners. Make sure you don't cut the plant you're trying to save, right? There's another. Again, you're gonna find weeds at the same time that you're doing this. I'll put that one in the bucket real quick. So I'm not gonna take. I probably could go ahead and take this way back away from it, and then I wouldn't have to do it as often. But I actually want to keep it. This pine isn't necessarily happy in 100-degree heat, and so the perennial growing up under its roots is probably helping shade those roots, cool those roots. And so if I wasn't running my mouth, everything that I can cut that down in a second, just like this, and then kick the stuff up underneath the plant, deadhead that thing, pull those 4 weeds and cut this away from this pine in 7 minutes. It just doesn't take that long to do it. But running my mouth, it takes a little bit longer than that. But we're rescuing plants, even though not necessarily the best time to prune something. I don't want a plant that I plan on having here for the next 10 years or whatever being harmed by a plant that may or may not come back next year. Some of our annuals have really long lasting flowers, and it just seems like they just go on and on and on flowering, but you'll notice the pollinators kind of drop off. Angelonia and pentas are definitely on that list, where the blooms just seem to sit there forever, but then the pollinators kind of disappear. They hold that flower in place even after they're pollinated, and so the bees and everything else know that there's nothing happening with that flower. That flower's done. Occasionally those things need to be cut off. So if you see a drop off in pollinator visits to any of your annuals, and this could be celosia, this could be the vinca here, it could be the dwarf zinnias we have out here, any of these things, if you start to see a drop off, a lot of times that just means the flower power is just kind of done. Although you're still seeing the color, you know, they've kind of done their job already. Got a spider back there that's, I got all these ambush spiders. You see that one right there? I don't know if you'll be able to get that. Oh, he just jumped. He just jumped. So it didn't see it. We got a ton of ambush spiders out here. I kind of, they're waiting for some little gnat or some little wasp or something to land on something, and they can jump on them. But there are some things that, although they appear to still be flowering, need a little bit of a haircut during the summer. And then what we'll do on these annual borders out here, we've had to do less of it this year. Honestly, the cool temperatures in May slowed this border down. We're just getting in July here to the point where we would be making decisions on pruning. I think last year we probably already pruned this border twice. You know, it just grown so much more with the warmer, earlier temperatures. It probably means it's gonna last longer, you know, into the fall and still look pretty good. But anything that's stretching, getting too big, eating something else, dominating the space, you know, those things could be pruned a bit right now. Then there's some general deadheading you can do to clean the place up if you want to. If you're in an area where butterfly bushes are invasive, it might be a good idea to cut your, you know, deadhead these butterfly bushes anyway, just in case there's any viable seed in there. But we'll, you know, any of these places I'm cutting, we'll side branch and you'll get additional flowers the rest of the summer. It's what's gonna happen anyway, and it kind of eats the flowers a bit, but I'd prefer to go up in there and clean this up. Steph will sometimes stand in the back of the pickup. Pickup's right beside that particular very large butterfly bush. The other option is, with this butterfly bush, it's actually a risk to itself once it gets 12 feet tall like this, or 10 or 11 feet tall like this, of a storm breaking it open. They're very, because these things that grow with this thing was cut to the ground and now it's 10 feet tall or 11 feet tall. Anything that grows that fast typically has very weak wood. And so if we were to get a big storm, you know, a lot of wind, it's one of the plants in this garden that could just absolutely split open. So it might be good if you have one that gets this kind of size on it, that sometime in July, rather than go up there and just individually deadhead it, you can just take a third of this thing off and it'll protect the plant, and it'll just come back out and look fresh and be back in full bloom in August. While we're doing our walk around in the garden and scouting for weeds, these suckers at the bottom of some of these plants, we've limbed some of our plants up into small trees here in the garden, but they continue to try to sucker down at the base. It's a really, you know, I don't want the energy from this plant going into something I'm definitely going to cut off in the future, and it's certainly easier to cut them off when they're that size than when they're bigger. You can look for it on virtually any plant in your garden that you've limbed up into a small tree. It's going to do this at some point. Obviously, one of the tasks you're probably going to have is watering. Containers could need water every day, for sure. I don't do a heck of a lot of fertilizing on them, and I don't really overplant them like crazy. I want them full by the end of the season for sure, but I'm not trying to have to water these twice a day. But they are getting to the point now where things are established enough in here that they need to be watered every day. So we'll water them enough to let the water flush out of the bottom of them to know we've gotten it right. On the soil, you know, again, I think watering is the hardest thing to learn in gardening because it's so much based on your temperatures and your humidity and the amount of time that you've put into soil, making the soil better, and whether you have sandy soils or clay soils, the types of plants that you're gardening with, you know, all determine, you know, some watering. So it's got to be one of those things you learn, but my advice is to check before you water. And so don't water to the driest thing in your garden. If you have one thing that's wilting and 300 things that aren't, that's probably a individual watering thing, right, for that one plant. Or maybe even it doesn't need it, and you can just let the sun go down and it'll perk back up potentially before you water it. If we do need to water, we will I'll water basically the entire space, okay? And that could be done if you had a drip irrigation system or pop-up irrigation system or whatever type of oscillating sprinkler you have, whatever it is. When I get to the point where I'm watering, I want to water the entire space, because watering, I've pulled up plants that were in the ground 8 to 10 years that had barely rooted out because they had an irrigation system that watered that plant every day. And it was basically sitting in a soup and had still in the shape of the 3-gallon or 7-gallon container when it went into the ground. Unbelievable. What I need is for all the soil to be kind of moist. And so the roots actually get out and about. That's the thing that's going to make your garden the most resilient. If I come here and I just water right at the base of the plant, you know, what reason does it have to root over there? That's what I need it to do. And if I can get it to root over there, that's less time, or that's more time between waterings, because it's got maybe a little more moisture over there where the roots are now. So keep that in mind. Water, when you get to that point where you're watering, just water the entire thing. The last thing that we do here in this garden, so we'll come out, scout for the weeds, pick the vegetables, save plants from other plants, do any deadheading that needs to be done. None of this stuff takes very long if you're staying on top of it. It takes a long time if you lose control of it. If you lose control of the weeds, or you lose control of the pruning, or you lose control of the space, then it takes a long time. But if you stay on top of them, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. And then once any watering is done, we have a deer issue here now. We have deer and rabbit issues. So we have a few perennials that we're throwing a shade cloth over, the perennials, to keep the rabbits from chewing on them. And then Steph will go around and spray some deer repellent on a few things that we know they're eating, the deer are. And then I have an irrigation setup that is on a motion detector that the water comes on. I move it. If you're dealing with deer like this, if you put the same defenses in the same spot every day, they'll get used to it pretty quickly. So make sure you're moving things around. I got lighting that I'm moving around, that I'm moving around. We're lucky that we hopefully don't just have deer from now on, but normally we have a deer come through and then move on. So we'll get a little damage and then it's no big deal because something chases them out of here. We've got one that's just moved in, or 4. I actually don't know because I can't figure out what time it's happening. So we are defending for that. So that's one additional thing that we've had this season that we haven't had in the past, is a little bit of deer defense that we're doing in the garden. So there you go. That's kind of we're going to call it a day in the life, but it's really, I think you'd be better off probably spending 10 minutes with your coffee, you know, and a bucket and picking a few weeds here or there. And then last but not least is enjoy the garden. You know, I don't want it, I just give you this task list, and then that's all the garden becomes, is a task list. Make sure that you're also spending some time just wandering around, walking it and enjoying it in some way, looking out your windows at it and appreciating the work that you've put into it. If you don't take that time, then it just is work. It's just like another job. and you don't want it to be just another job. Also, take the time to enjoy. You know, one other thing, you know, I get these questions about, something's eating, you know, we'll get bees that will, leaf cutter bees that will take pieces of our red bud over there. You know, we'll get, you know, I'll get questions on these things. Take the time to appreciate the fact that you gave that bee an opportunity to do that. That spider in the front garden that's waiting to ambush, that's what that spider does. That's what that spider has evolved to do, is to be an ambush predator on flowers. I appreciate the fact that it's out there in the front garden and it can, you know, has this ability to just sit all day long and wait and just grab something like that. It's unbelievable to me. And it's a fun part of the garden. It should be, in my opinion, I'm hitting the microphone, that's not good. In my opinion, it's a fun part of the garden to watch that spider sit there, you know, for 12 hours, 24 hours a day, just waiting for something to land on that particular flower so it can ambush them. And then, of course, you know, all the bees and the pollinators and, you know, all the things that get to take advantage of our hard work out here in the garden. Just take time to appreciate that. Thank you guys for watching.